so good is the wild meat down there in Tennessee. Wild meat there in Tennessee. Welcome. Those of you who are in Georgia, Georgia in my mind, Georgia. Those of you down there in Georgia, especially in Atlanta and its environs, welcome to Politics 101. And of course, we have people in South Carolina. And we're driving through South Carolina. If you see peach and peach, yes, outside of the road, you're driving through South Carolina. Peach. In those days when you live in Washington, D.C., as I live, and you're going down to Florida and thing, you aren't worrying for flying no airplane. You drive down. And it was quite a sight. I remember when I moved from Washington, D.C., Maryland to California, I drove across the country. It took me about 3 days, but what an experience to see the heart of America. And I'm talking about the physical beauty. I'm not talking about big bridge and so on, going through. And I remember going through, I drove through Kentucky. And when I got to Kentucky, all the cars, them, and trucks flying past me, foop. I said, well, what's going on here? Voodoo. When I do catch myself, the speed limit was 80. 80 miles per hour. I come from Maryland, I think it was 65 then. So I drive in 65. 80 miles per hour, so they fat pipe and voodoo. Quite an experience to drive through the country and so on. Good evening to you, Mr. Selvin Peters, attorney at law, counsel, joining us from Toronto, Canada. He's an old Golden Grove man, and he has family in Buxton, and so on. He's a true Guyanese, and I envy you because you were down in Guyana recently, and I was not there, but I'm coming. Welcome to Politics 101. Let's get started. Good evening, Toronto, where Selwyn is. My good friends there, Brian, Moses, and all the Moses them, and the Burke and Garnets and Philanders. I'm not leaving out Miss Philander because I understand she abused me and says only man. I just big up. What a charge. I just only big up the boys. And I don't talk but the girls. Good evening to all the Buxtonian and Guyanese women in Canada. Not Canada. Canada. Me go Canada. And Canada. Welcome to Politics 101. All our friends in the mother country. In London. In the old days, Kitchener. London is the place to be. You can go to America, you can go to Australia, but you got to come back to London. That was Kitchener back in the 40s and the 50s. But that's where he sing the song, the Christmas song. Mama, mama. Mama. Please join you, sonny. I am over here in the mother country. Yeah. We have a love affair with England. I didn't want to come to America. England was where I wanted to go because I wanted to go to Lord's and the Oval and Leeds, Headingley, and Old Trafford. That was always my dream as a little boy. Fighting with America. I wanted to go to England. And up to now, I haven't made it to Lord's. I have two children in England, and they're trying to get me to go there, and they want to take their father to Lord's and the Oval and so forth. They don't know if I'm gonna make it to Manchester. Cause they're a little far out, they say. But certainly they want to take me to the Oval and to Lord's. And I'm trying to fit them in. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We ready? ready to roll. Dr. Vincent Adams, you had any dare recently?
Well, here, you know, elk, we eat a lot of, and elk is, you know, I ate it for the first time in Tennessee, and of course, those guys, after I ate it for the first time, those guys used to bring it to me. As soon as they made a catch, it's one of the really nicer meat to eat.
Yes.
It,
Yes.
you know, I lived. I mean, those guys. I know the thing is, you know, hunting. We take hunting, you know, like little by sport back in Guyana, but this here is a big deal. I mean, it's a big business just to go hunting.
Yes.
You know, it's a big deal. You know, those guys when they make their catch, it's a big prize for them.
Yeah, and well, we hunted was hunt with dog.
That's
We say go and hunt. You're going and hunt with dog. When you go to West Bobby's where Lincoln comes from, they're going to hunt with dog. Mr. Lewis, good evening. Do you remember Tennessee Walls?
Well, you know, I can waltz, you know. I know only that I remember so many.
I am not questioning your waltzing ability, because if you didn't know for waltz, they put you out from number 20.
Here, that time, you better, them boys watching, you better touch all four corners.
That's right.
You got to touch all four.
No, let me tell you, David. Let me tell you this. I am right now speaking to you from number 28. We get a wake tonight and you get one man band. And you got to dance there. You got to know you got to get in the ring. So from when I see
Dr. Hines, I told you, you call him a Linden. I told you he was only a transplanted Linden. You see where he's going? Yeah.
28th man. Say hello to my family them in 28.
you sometimes I go into the wake.
When you go,
And
look, when we used to go to dance Kwekwe in West Coast Bobby's, we said, well, and Kofi, you know where we're going? And Kofi said, no, I don't know where we're going. I know we're going 28 or we're going Belladrum, but I don't know exactly where. So how you gonna know? He said, well, when you land in the village, I know the road. They got plenty road. I know the road. And you go down the road, wherever you see plenty dog, you know that's where the Kwekwe there. Because it's enough meat, enough beef, and them dog did a doro. He said, you will know, just follow. And when we get to the Kwekos, and Kofi just go through the back door, and we try to figure out why and Kofi would go through the back door. He said, at the kitchen, you always go and you peruse the kitchen first. You not go through front door, you go and peruse the kitchen and see what's going on there. Brother Elson Lowe, we are regaling you with big man story because we want you grow up. Because when Doc and Lincoln, we were little boys, we used to hang out with big man.
Yeah.
That was a privilege, you know.
And you better know your place. You better know your place.
You hanging out with us tonight is a big privilege, you know. Little boy who bicycle not get brakes, could hang out with big man. Good evening, Elson, and welcome to Politics 101. I imagine your week would have been quite busy, huh?
Yes, absolutely. I think I did 3 shows in the same evening at one point, but it's definitely an important time. So I'm happy to come and have a chat with you guys and to hear you regale me with all manner of tales.
Well, you got to talk to your old man and ask you them big man story, ask you about Tennessee Walls and all them fancy story there. You ever have a baked pone, Elson? You ever have a baked pone?
Yeah, the is like a dessert, I guess. Or
No, Elson, when you go to a party and you and get a dance.
That's right, you're baking pone.
You bake pone. Okay. Because in them days, boy got to beg girls to dance. Yeah. And one of the cardinal principles that you couldn't dance and match the girl too, or else you won't get dance no more. So boys used to be very careful about going and ask if you're not too confident. So if you're not too confident, you don't get no dance, you bake pool.
That's right.
So you learn something tonight. Nowadays, you don't bake pool because you go in and back ball, them girl dancing, you go in and say, can I have a dance? You move in for the kill on the back ball. Times have changed. Good evening to everyone. Elson, we start off with you. You have had 1 week to digest the budget. You made some preliminary observations. We are saying here tonight, this is an anti-labor, anti-poor budget. What says so?
No, I absolutely agree. I think when you look at some of the measures in the budgets, you look at the size of the change in the budget, you can kind of get a sense that the government hasn't really any regard for the average Guyanese. I'll talk a bit about taxes, but I also want to touch again on the cost of living crisis because there's additional data that is, I think, is important to note. The first thing I'd say on taxes is the government has indicated they expect over $400 billion in taxes this year. That is larger than the budget of only a couple of years ago, if you throw your mind back, just in tax collection. And yet, when it comes to removing taxes for those at the low end of the income scale, or those even, I think, middle-income Guyanese, what do? A measly $4 billion reduction. When it comes to what pensioners are looking forward to, the increase they're looking forward to, that's only $2-3 billion that the government has allocated, despite the fact that they're now collecting over $400 billion in taxes, and that the taxes this year are expected to grow by over $40 billion as additional taxes. Now, I'd ask you this simple question: if we're getting more oil revenue, our country is growing, you have a sovereign wealth fund, why would you be looking to increase the overall amount of taxation that Guyanese are facing? Rather, you should be looking at alleviating taxation, especially at the low end of the income scale. We have called for the tax threshold to move to $150,000, which could easily have been afforded just by the expected increase in taxes. That to me gives you a sense that they have no interest in the poor, the working poor, the average Guyanese. But that's one half of the coin. The other half of the coin is the cost of living crisis. And I was just today chatting with some other economists about this ridiculous inflation that is not inflation rate that the government is trying to put forward. This 2% that they're saying was the inflation rate last year, or 2.5% next year, which is as if you're saying there's no inflation. The IMF had indicated 5.5% inflation last year, more than double what the government is saying was the inflation rate. I had calculated 7%. The US government had put out 6.6%. So it is either that these guys are totally deluded and they don't live in Guyana, or that they're making a deliberate attempt to mislead the Guyanese public as to what is going on. But you can't mislead people who are buying food every day, taking transportation every day, buying things in the stores every day, and who are feeling the real difficulties that come from a cost of living crunch. So that, I think, is the other side of it. On the one hand, they're taxing you when they don't need to be taxing you. But on the other hand, they're refusing to acknowledge that prices are increasing and people's purchasing power falling, people's real wages falling or being reduced as a result of that. And times are getting harder and harder. Now, before, when we first found oil and there was all this excitement, we expected things will get better. But I don't think anybody anticipated that you're going to be in a situation where you've got 5 years worth of spending in 1 year, and rather than seeing your incomes improve as you would expect them to, significant improvements in your income, you're seeing this pressure on them from runaway inflation that the government is a big part of. I think that has really come to affect the everyday life of Guyanese. High prices, high taxes, and a government that doesn't seem to have any kind of sympathy whatsoever. And I haven't even talked about the limited measures that they put in place or they might put in place to deal with inflation, which are less than 1% of the budget. You know, again, they're looking at $40 billion in additional taxes, but it's a little $7 billion for cost of living mitigation. What? Why exactly is there this focus on a larger budget, collecting more taxes, but at the same time, the average Guyanese is seeing the standard of living fall?
Yeah. And as you talk about the rate of inflation, I mean, why they are trying to fudge the numbers, I don't know. Because if you are doing 10% inflation and less, that's considered reasonable. So in any case, I mean, you know, it's not runaway when compared with some of the other places. I mean, it's bad enough.
Well, I give you one interesting point on it, and really you want 3% of the most inflation. But I give you another point on this. The government is coming out with some high numbers for growth of the non-oil GDP. They say 11% and so on. But you can only pull out an 11% number for people if you are fudging your inflation numbers. You have a low number. So the 11% really is not 11%. It's more like a 6% or a 5% growth rate, which is the same or similar growth rate to what you saw under the coalition. So one of the reasons, one of the motivations behind fudging this inflation rate is to hide the fact that they're spending several times as much as the coalition in 1 year and are not growing the economy much faster, any faster than the coalition really was growing the economy. So when you hide your inflation numbers, you can put out a higher number and pretend as if that's the real number, when really when you adjust it for inflation as you should, it's a far lower number. I think that is one of the motivations behind this. And to me, that makes sense when Guyanese, their lived experience is, as we say in Guyana, money not flowing. That's what you're hearing in the streets, money not flowing. If you spend 5 years worth of budgets in 1 year and money not flowing, something is definitely wrong.
Yeah, Elson, and Elson, there is something that jumped out at me from the budget, and this is coming from Jack Day himself, which I'm going to have you discuss later, and that is that 40% or thereabout of the budget will be financed by loans. I recognize that borrowing is an important part of the capitalist system, but I would like to get from you whether 40% loans in a budget in a country with the kind of money that we are getting. But we'll come back to that. Let me bring in Dr. Vincent Adams here. Doc, as you peruse the budget, what is it that jumped out at you? What jumped out at you? What are the things that jumped out at you?
You're welcome. Welcome to our listeners and my good friend Elson and Lincoln and yourself. You know, the nice thing about this here, Dr. Hines, it wasn't difficult. This budget was probably one of the simplest budgets to analyze. You know, budgets are, obviously there's only one pie and everything fits into that pie. So there's no infinite budget, which means budgets is how you set your priorities. This is a reflection of the government's philosophy. It's care about the people when you line up those priorities, and it's the people's priorities. And it's obvious that this budget is, of course, it's in the heart and soul is with the rich, and there's disdain for those in poverty. And to put things, because I think people need to pay attention to put things into perspective, and I know Elson touched on it. This budget here is equal, well, just about equal to all 5 of the budgets under the previous administration put together. Listen, audience, all 5 years, all 5 budgets of the administration from 2015 through 2019 adds up to this 1 year of budget. Yet this government has the gall to be comparing in their justification of their budget as to comparing what the previous administration spent on these items versus what they're spending on these items. So here's my biggest take from all of this. Let's talk, what is touching the people, because that's where you have to go, is to what should be the priorities of the people. Unfortunately, this government is showing in this budget, and they're demonstrating in this budget and other places, that the interest and care is not about the people. The cost of living. And this ridiculous nonsense about 2%. And you're talking about, well, why would they fib to that extent? The guy could have stopped and said, well, okay, it's 2%. And the guy even went further to talk about the food prices. He said the food basket. The food basket is only 3% inflation. I mean, that's the most. So, and it's only when it was, even when I was in Guyana, I could have buy a nice piece of pumpkin for 100. I know the pumpkin is the, but you could have buy a piece of pumpkin for $100. It's $1,000 or $1,200 right now. So for him to be telling us the food basket, man, he didn't even say, he could have stopped at inflation and you could argue. The guy went as far as to say that the food basket inflation is 3%. And we know that that's not true. But the thing is, the reason why they continue is because they believe that Guyanese are fools, and they know that they've got a certain amount of people, they will never lose a vote. You remember, it's the old Donald Trump thing. Donald Trump said he could go on the Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and he will not lose a vote. That's what's happening here. They can talk and get away with it, and they're not being held accountable. No. Let's get to the priorities of the people. We have in this budget, and it was repeated several times, it's not even the infrastructure number, because the infrastructure number is 240 something billion. The roads is $204 billion. Roads and bridges, 204. If you look at that, that's almost 20% of that entire budget for roads alone. But if you look at what's spent on the poor, let's go to the public servants. The public servants, that's even in nobody knows what that's going to be, which means it's not even part of the budget for all practical purposes, which means it's a second thought. We're going to wait until the end of the year and see what happens. But let's look at the real number, the real story behind that number. They said it's 54,000 people. And if you take the average household of 4 persons, we're looking at 200,000 people affected in those 54,000 employees. And then you've got another 70,000. I'm just repeating their numbers for the retired folks, the older folks. So that's 270,000. So you're almost a third of the population. And when you add up the numbers that they're supposedly set aside, when you add up the numbers, here you have where you have 2%. The numbers add up to about 2%, and Nelson might correct me, but I'm just going with the numbers that I see. When you add up those two numbers, you know, the 7 billion, not the 7 billion, whatever, I think it's 21 billion or something they've got in this big pool that they're going to be looking at for public servants. But let's assume all of those. But so it's less than 2% of the budget is going to 33% or a third of the population for all practical purposes. Am I still there?
Yes, you are on. Yes.
Yes. So, you know, so those are the, and then they prepare us. Now, for the infrastructure part, the vice president is slick enough to prepare us even before the budget came out to say, here, you know what, they're going to be screws up. We are going to get delays and overcost and these type of things. It's inevitable. Now, if I go tell my boss or anybody in a civil country or in a real country, go tell their bosses that, they would get fired immediately. So it doesn't matter, you know, they're going ahead. Look, and just to show you, just to be specific, because of course, you know, I'm a Linden man. And I just saw this morning on a press conference from Region 10. And it was revealed that even in this, you can, I mean, it shows the pattern in terms of who gets these construction jobs, where the money is going. For that bridge across the Demerara River at Linden, there was a contractor, a local contractor, who has been maintaining that bridge for 10 years. 6 months ago, they got rid of that local contractor and brought in somebody from outside of Linden. And they're having all kinds of problems at the bridge right now. They're almost on strike. I think Sherrod had a program yesterday or whenever it did this, a couple of days ago. People are up in arms. To cross the bridge now, a 5-minute trip is taking an hour and a half.
Wow.
1 hour and a half. And if you go look at Cheryl's program with the guys who were interviewed, a 5-minute trip, because now apparently there is something that this new contractor did in terms of the repairs and all kinds of stuff. It's messing up their vehicles and the tires and everything else. Again, you had a local contractor who was there for 10 years, and now they got rid of him and brought in this new contractor. Let me touch on education, because of course that's near and dear to all of our hearts. And you and I, Elson again is probably, he's in a different generation, but me and Lincoln know that education, at least had it not been for free education, people like us would not have even been here. Not only that, I want all of those older and mature politicians in the PPP and the PNC, by the way, and the AFC, which one of them did not enjoy a free education at the University of Guyana to start with? As a matter of fact, it's education, not infrastructure, that forms the foundation of building an economy. I know for a fact, because that's the policy that we had to build our budget in the United States, and Singapore and everybody, all the Asian miracles. It's about education, and there are details to show that, because we used to look at what they're doing to develop our policies, and we look compare India and China, for example. That was what made the difference in them becoming the superpower. So here we have that they're backward. That's old thinking. You build it, they're going to come. That is old thinking. It's education, education, education. And so now they're going with this old textbook thing that is infrastructure. It is not infrastructure. As a matter of fact, infrastructure is number 3. After education is following the rule of law. And it's a very simple reason behind that, because if you've got on top of a reliable, competent workforce, if you've got a disciplined workforce, because if the people are trained and have the culture of following the rule of law, they're going to be good employees, because they're going to be disciplined, coming to work on time, following rules and regulations. And infrastructure is number 3. That's the new paradigm. So when they talk about this, when you put in 20% of your entire of $1 trillion economy, and you've got people starving, people cannot afford to pay to go to school, and then you're coming up with this gimmick about this gold program. I've asked the question, by the way. Nobody has raised it, and I've not. Are these? I looked through the list of those so-called whatever institutions, and you're into academics more than I do, Dr. Hines. But are these institutions accredited?
Yeah.
And by whom?
Yeah.
And by whom? It's a cottage industry that is being developed now in Guyana, where everybody has these online courses. But is it value? Is it valiant, or is it just a certificate you're getting? And you could have only passed the test in Guyana, but when you go to apply it, there's nothing to apply, because you really hadn't learned anything to apply. And so that's my take on
the budget there. Lincoln, are you with us? I know Lincoln is having some difficulty. I'm so glad you mentioned education. My bachelor's degree, my first 2 years were at UG, free. I then went to America and finished at the University of District of Columbia. And it was $363 per semester. So I did my final 5 semesters. You multiply 5 by 363, that is about $2,000. Now, because I'm paying nothing at UG, my bachelor's degree cost $2,000. Now, of course, that's 40 years ago, but it was still cheap, even by those standards. And so those of us who had that experience, now my children and grandchildren, when they're talking about university, they're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for a degree, and they're leaving university with and we're talking about undergraduate, not graduate degree.
Yeah.
The thing, I got to Howard and got a full scholarship at Howard for my PhD.
Yeah.
You see? So when those of you in the audience, and I'm sure all of you had that experience, when you hear us cry over education, you know, it's much more than just economics for us, education. I don't know, my mother and them couldn't afford for me to go to Howard University. They could not. My mother lived not too far from Howard. She migrated in 1969, and she would pass Howard every day, go to the bus stop there waiting for bus, and she would see the students going to Howard, and she saying to herself, one of my children got to go to this university. That's all she knew.
Yeah.
She couldn't pay for it. And because of the start I got at UG, and so on, and couldn't and didn't pay anything there, paid little for nothing at UDC in Washington DC, and then went to Howard with a full scholarship for my PhD. I only had to pay for my master's. And so education is such an important thing for people who look like us and come from places like Guyana, and to see.
Not cutting you. You see
Yeah.
that guy? You see this guy behind me here? Dr. Martin Luther King.
Uh-huh.
His most famous quote is, "Education is the great equalizer."
Yes,
The great equalizer.
yes, yes.
The
And he
great
talked about education to nourish our minds.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King. Elson, let me bring you back in here, because I want you to tackle this question of the 40% of the budget that is going to be financed through loans. Now, you're an economist. I am not an economist, but I know that whether it's in the United States of America or England or wherever, borrowing is a normal thing, you know. You know, it's a normal thing to borrow. A lot of big businesses function on loans. But in our Guyana, talk to us. Is 40% of a budget on loans, is that too much? What? Talk to us.
Well, I'll make a couple of remarks. I just want to touch on the question of education, though, before we move off of this.
Yes.
You know, many studies, I could probably point you to, I don't know, 100 studies that show that education has a positive impact on the growth of an economy, on incomes, on various sociological factors, various social factors. But really, education also allows you to have a bigger services sector, allows you to improve your existing businesses, adopt technology, improve those existing businesses. We have continued to stress on how important the University of Guyana is, and funding it is, providing it the funding that needs for research and so on, because we believe that that is vital in order for us to move our economy forward. When you look at Silicon Valley in California, Silicon Valley is anchored in Stanford University. That is the anchor. That is really what has been driving Silicon Valley, in addition to Berkeley University, which is also there. Now, what has happened is a lot of people who got an education there went off to start businesses or to improve businesses. The lists are endless of graduates. I believe Larry Page and Sergey Brin are two Stanford students who started Google. So the point being, if you have a robust university, it has an effect across your entire economy. The PPP just doesn't seem to understand this, can't seem to get this. We even saw the vice president saying that they don't want to fund the university because it's online classes. Someone pointed out to me that that's deeply ironic, given that goal is online. So I don't know what kind of nonsensical stance that is. But really, it's that the PPP has never wanted to fund the University of Guyana properly. They have had decades to fund the University of Guyana properly, and they refuse to do so. That is not going to be the case under the next coalition government. We believe strongly that the university must be funded. We believe strongly in research, and we believe that that is going to be a driver of economic growth. Now, I leave that as one particular issue. Now, as we come to look at the debt in of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on the way you manage it and the way that you manage the overall economy and government. The problem that we've got in Guyana is we started off by the Minister for Finance saying that they're going to change the withdrawal rules for the Sovereign Wealth Fund for the NRF. which leads me to worry that they're going to drain the NRF. So we have to see exactly what is going to happen there. Now, if you accumulate a lot of debt while at the same time draining the NRF, if you have an oil price crash, you will find yourself in some serious trouble. And so this to me represents debt without any kind of a structure that will allow the taking on of additional debt to be sustainable. It has to be sustainable. I even made some remarks about using interest payments to pay public servants. But what I said is you have to look at what share of interest payments is a sustainable share to use to pay public servants. I didn't just say spend out all the money and that's the end of it. But that's what we're seeing, or at least that is, I think, the great anxiety that we're getting from a government that is spending like a drunken sailor, and at the same time looking to go into the savings, and at the same time borrowing. So this is a very toxic combination. That's the first part. The other part of it is, however, that the government has refused to engage with the IMF recommendations to reform governance, where the IMF had indicated that governance reform is urgently needed because of the massive losses that we face in Ghana due to improper management of projects, not doing feasibility studies, not listening to feasibility studies. And so while you're borrowing 40% of your budget, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, you're also losing hundreds of billions of dollars that you would otherwise not have to lose. And so that is the ridiculousness that we're facing. The government is on the one hand borrowing money to go and misuse the money and lose a huge chunk of that same money that they borrowed. And so if they borrow money to build a road, one way to read it is they're going to lose 41 cents out of every dollar they borrow because they have not reformed the governance in Guyana. And to give you a concrete understanding of this as Guyanese look at this, I always pointed to Grove Road. They rebuilt the Grove Road 2-3 times within a short space of time. And you've got a minister saying that the reason the road has to be rebuilt is because big trucks are traveling on the road. Everybody knows the big trucks are traveling on that road. The smallest guy could tell you that there's only one road for them to travel on, really. So that means that you're not doing a proper study. And as a result of not doing a proper study and not putting in place the right infrastructure for the road, you have to rebuild the road multiple times. That's a classic example of the losses that you're looking at. But you're seeing that across the economy in various ways. And so they're borrowing money and then losing that same money because they're not managing the economy well. That is a recipe for disaster. So on the top line, you're looking at them raiding the savings and borrowing a lot of money. But on the other hand, you're looking at them wasting the same money that they've borrowed. That, to me, puts us in a very, very tenuous position going forward.
Very tenuous position. Dr. Vincent Adams coming back because I noticed you put on your spectacle just now. And when you see him have put on his spectacles, he ready to war. What is a spectacle? Not glasses. These
on some hot buttons there.
Yes.
And of course, this whole thing about studies. There, and I don't know if you can charge it in competence. Especially if they always say, I've always been taught it's very dangerous if you don't know what you don't know. But I believe it's not only ignorance. I believe this here is political, and it's about taking care of who. It's about filling each other's pockets and taking care of their friends, family. Now you cannot tell me they could be that ignorant. For example, simple things like feasibility studies. Any major project, it's standard that you must do feasibility study. On top of that, their biggest project right now, the Gas to Shore project, it's written into the contract between the government and Exxon that thou shalt have to do a feasibility study in any use of that gas coming out of there. And that is what misuse, and those are the part of the lawsuit that they filed. But they don't care, even though they're saying, well, this contract, there's sanctity in contract and all this kinds of stuff. So they really don't care. And like I said, it's because there is no accountability. Going back to even the environmental issues, they're not doing environmental impact assessments, they did not do an environmental impact assessment for that gas plant. And you know what the head of the EPA said in a public meeting? when it was when they had a hearing, when the people protested that there must be an EIA. You know what the guy got up and said in a public meeting that if they do an EIA for that gas plant, they would have to do an EIA for every single automobile that we drive on the streets of Guyana. That's so foolish, and it's on record, it's on video. I could not believe it. I almost fell out of my chair. So so these are it's a culture, and they're getting away with it because there's no accountability. And then you hear this budget is really bringing out some foolishness. You hear the minister. I think somebody was heckling, saying, "Well, okay, they're leaving. We're training, and 80% of the people are leaving." You know what was his comeback? Well, we got to train them, so it doesn't matter whether they leave or not. So that's it's like what the Elson was saying. Well, if the truck's damaging the road, well, that's what the roads are built for. You've got to build a road to accommodate whatever traffic there is. He's saying, well, 80% of the people are leaving. That's not a big issue. We're going to keep training them and let them go, but we're going to bring in foreign employees. The NRF, people need to know this here is important too. The NRF is being abused. It's as a cash cow for their political agendas. And the reason why they want to up the limit on money that they can come out of the NRF is obviously because then they don't have to take that money coming out of there to Parliament. They've got this little group, this 7-man, I think it's 7. But every single member of that 7-man committee that determines that money were PPP appointed. They had an agreement with the opposition that the opposition was going to submit, I think, 2 or 3 people to that committee. And they turned on all 3 of those names. The opposition walked out, and that was the end of it. And that's why we've got what we've got here. And I want the other thing for people to remember, going back to education, the free education that all of us enjoyed, and it gave us the grounding to be successful. Whether I did my 4th degree in University of Guyana, didn't have to pay a dime. I got the opportunity to come over here, but because of that grounding, I did not have to pay a dime throughout my education because I got fellowships and teaching assistantship. But if I did not get that grounding, and even to end up in the job that I got, so free education. I know they've got the gall. I mean, this guy, especially Vice President, is so barefaced that he talks and he brings it up that the opposition raised fees. Hell, they're the ones who abolished free education. To compare abolishing free education with raising fees is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard, especially now that you're only giving this amount of money to the University. They have no interest in the University of Guyana, none. I can tell you, in my personal experience, I was responsible with the team. I was appointed before even the year before I started working. When I came back to work, Griffith, Vice Chancellor Griffith, asked me to come in, give me a fancy title. I think it's Distinguished Engineer in Residence, to revamp the University Faculty of Technology to prepare for forced oil. We set up a petroleum engineering department with bringing in 2 high-powered professors. We did not even have a lab. There's no chemistry department at UG anymore. In contrast to when I was there, it was a top-notch university when it was first built. So what we did, we had to piggyback on the UWI program in University of Trinidad and Tobago. Here's the other thing. He talking about lecture. I remember the meeting that we had, the first meeting with myself, Vice Chancellor, University of Trinidad and Tobago, and the UWI staff in Trinidad. I never met the staff at University of Guyana. And we were going around the table introducing each other. And every one of the University of Trinidad and Tobago professors and UWI, PhD from Tulsa, PhD, everyone. Do you know what our teachers had? Bachelor's degrees.
Bachelor's degree, yeah.
And I'm talking about heads of departments.
Yeah.
The assistant dean had a bachelor's degree. So that's the kind of thing that, no, it's not these folks. They're not at fault. I'm just talking.
Yeah.
And that is and now he is talking about, well, the UG have to upgrade its quality. How the hell could you how could they do it on their own
That's why you
without
have to spend money.
you've got to that's what he said in his budget thing yesterday. Well, they've got to upgrade the quality. How the hell could you upgrade the quality? I remember when I was in Guyana, when Dr. Griffith was in charge, professors, teachers were not turning in grades for years.
Yeah.
And when I put it into the requirements, into the performance plan, he added a couple of sentences to say all to make them accountable. Your promotion, your raises, and everything will be determined upon performance. There was a strike for that one sentence that everything has to be based upon performance. So, and now he is saying, well, you need to up the quality. How the hell could they up the quality without any resources? So that's where we are. So this you see, there's the numbers are one thing, but it's the story behind the numbers, it's the philosophy, and who does government care for, which this budget really, that's the picture. What's more important than the numbers is the picture that the numbers are painting. And that's what we need to be focusing on.
We need to be focusing on. And I just want to say that we are not criticizing the lecturers at UG. God,
No.
the conditions under which they work there, I am telling you, it has to be a love of labor, love of country, love of education. For offices without AC and
toilets, the toilets, no toilets.
No, not at all. So it's not the lecturers. Elson, I want you to talk about that $7 billion, but before you do, tell us what you know about the rally tomorrow night.
Yes, there's going to be a rally against the cost of living from 5 p.m. at Burnham Court. I'll be speaking there. The leader of the opposition, the leader of the AFC will be speaking, as well as many other speakers. It is really, I think, a venue where a lot of Guyanese can express some frustration, can listen to what is going on, and get a better sense of what can be done to help to improve their lives right now, and can send a signal to the government that it is not acceptable for them to pretend that there's no cost of living crisis, pretend that prices are not going up. And therefore,
we seem to be experiencing some difficulty. Are you
hearing
Elson,
me now?
Are you with us?
Are you hearing me?
I think, Elson, you hearing me, right?
Yeah.
I think Dr. Hines is.
Oh, it's on his end. It's on his end.
Yeah.
Well, just to wrap up what I was saying, ultimately, if we allow the government, they will be happy to pretend there's no cost of living crisis, prices are not going up, there's no need for any intervention to help the average Guyanese. We've got you back, Dr. Hines. Yeah, I was just saying, if we let the government is happy to pretend that there's no cost of living crisis, we must demonstrate to them. That's why we're asking people to come out in the numbers, that this is an urgent issue and that Guyanese are suffering. It is vital that we as Guyanese show that the government cannot last year be spending as much as 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014 combined. This year, again, spending as much as from 2015 to 2020 nearly combined. And Guyanese not see tangible improvements to their standard of living, not see tangible improvements to their salaries, not see something significant done about this cost of living crisis. It is absolutely ridiculous, but the government is perfectly happy to spend money, but not spend money on Guyanese. Even if you look at public servant salaries, one of the things that you'd note is if they're going to spend in 1 year, 5 years worth of budgets, we better be seeing a 77% salary increase come, because that's what 5 years worth of budgets got you on the coalition. But as to whether they will do that, from what is been put aside, it doesn't seem like there's any intention to raise public servant salaries to that extent. Even when you look at the other measures like the Because We Care cash grant, I thought that was going to be far higher, a measly 5,000. When you look at pensions, I thought that was again going to be much higher, a measly $3,000. If we don't show up in our numbers and communicate to them our frustration, the government is happy to continue as is. But I'll say this is not the first year that they've given mere frecks while massively increasing the budget. Really, I think that the only solution here is to get the BBP out of office, because they have made up their minds that they're happy to see Guyanese suffer.
Yes, and that's $7 billion.
Yeah, well, the first thing is the 7 billion is not even 1% of the national budget. The second thing is I previously talked about the 60 billion windfall that we got from the high oil price in 2022, which is due to the war in Ukraine. And tonight I brought up an additional $40 billion. That is an additional expected tax revenue. So clearly there's money available, there's resources available. But what you've seen from the government is a 5 billion, a 5 billion, a 7 billion. These minimal amounts, they could do several times as much each year, really, in terms of direct cost of living mitigation. That's the first thing. But the thing that I think is I must reiterate is very disturbing is last year they couldn't even figure out what to do with the 5 billion they themselves put aside until the very end of the year, which leads me to believe that this same 7 billion, they're not going to really use it until the very end of the year. So in the meanwhile, the 11 months, you have to be out here suffering in every imaginable way from the cost of living crisis. And even when they put it, even in the budget, it was indicated that they're only going to spend the 7 billion after some consultations. Man, if they don't know what to do, they should just come out and say that, because that sounds like they don't know what to do and they're just putting a few dollars there. We have repeatedly highlighted that there's so many measures that we could be focusing on, whether it is developing regional agriculture, whether it is targeting transportation costs directly for farm to market transportation by providing lower cost fuel vouchers. That is something that you could do easily, whether it is providing larger above inflation increases to public servants, whether it is ensuring that there is an increase for pensioners and in other cash grants that is going to more than compensate for these increases in prices and the increases in the country's GDP per capita. There's a wide range of measures that we put forward all the way back in last year's budget presentation, many of them, that the government has not taken on board because I guess it comes from us and they don't know and they don't want to acknowledge that we have quite a large number of solutions available. The upshot of that is that you're going to continue to see high inflation, you're going to continue to see a high cost of living. And even now the IMF is projecting a 4.7% inflation rate, which is nearly double what the Minister for Finance is saying. That means it's again going to be a difficult year when it comes to the cost of living.
Dr. Adams, anything that you want to come in with that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think we touched on everything, and I think that I would just want to ask Elson here and you, Dr. Hyde, because you're the expert politician here too. It's very frustrating, obviously, and we are expressing our frustration because everything that we're talking about, it's in your face, it's blatant. It's not a case where they're sneaking around and we over and over getting it out to the people with your program, etc. What else could we do for it to register with the people? Because it's so in your face and so obvious and blatant, but it's just as if it's not registering with the people. What else? And of course, by the way, we're talking about public servants and the pensioners. Don't let us forget those cane cutters who had to go on strike.
Yes.
That was making a measly, I can't remember what it was, very small amount of money. I was shocked. I mean, don't forget those set of people that are even within the constituency of the government. How do we make it register the reality in these people's mind? That's
Yes.
the big question.
And of course, one of the ways to do that is to have public demonstrations, and the public rally tomorrow night is a start to go into the public space. And I know we've been having a lot of debate. The opposition has been taking a lot of knocks that they're not putting boots on the ground, but it's one of the ways, and they're making a start tomorrow night. So those of you who are in and around Georgetown, those of you who are away from Georgetown and where transportation is available, please turn out to the rally. Elson, your closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the things I would say to Guyanese is, you know, really, if the PPP is allowed to continue without us demonstrating, whether through our presence or otherwise, that we are paying attention to these issues and that people are frustrated, they're going to go full steam ahead. We've looked at last year's budget as big as, and all spending told, as big as 5 years. This year, as big as another 5 years. These guys are going to continue on this particular freight train, and they're not gonna really provide any assistance to Guyanese. In order for you really to get assistance, you got to get them out. But in order, at least I think at minimum, for us to see some more relief, we've got to demonstrate and come out and make our voices heard across Guyana. You know, we must always remind Guyanese that this is a rich country. It's the country adjusting for prices with the 10th highest GDP per capita in the world. We've blown past the United Kingdom, blown past the European Union average. It is not acceptable for Guyanese to be struggling to make ends meet. It is not acceptable. And we have to see a changed country given the changes that have happened. It can't just be that those who are close to the government are benefiting and everybody else is back in pre-oil Guyana.
Back in pre-oil.
Quickly, Dr. Hanks, let me,
yes.
And I might need for you to come in here, right? And you might want to, I'm sure that Elson has read about it, but public servants. You remember, was it the Calder budget? What happened when we had public servants going on strike and you know?
It's a day strike, yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you know, it looks as if for history, everything is being set up for history to repeat itself. The other thing is, again, all politics are local. And the other thing that I heard that was also very disturbing, and you know, when you hear that the PPP is saying that it's not true, that they're favoring one race over the next. This morning, what I heard also in that Region 10 press conference was very disturbing. I had spoken about it before, but I never knew if there was even deeper issues than that. The regional chairman himself said, and you remember, I think it might have been a year ago, that they terminated the program, the nursing program in Linden.
Yes.
That's been going on forever since I was a little kid. They had that program.
Yes.
Well, here's the part that I did not know about that the chairman talked about. He said that they threatened the nurses that if any of them applied to go to Berbice or the Georgetown school, they will be blacklisted for life. And then they went back and they brought back six names into the program, which was the 4-year program of those, you know, of the terminated hope. And those 6 names had names such as Dindial and those type of names. So I mean, he was, I did not know the details of that, but those are the kinds of things that people need to start opening their eyes and understand. This here is for real, and these people really do not care.
They don't care. And of course, the nurses, they're taking out their money when they went on strike. The court said they must give back the people their money. They haven't given them money. They're appealing. I mean, imagine you're appealing, giving back nurses. My goodness. And the nurses story at Linden go way back. In the 1960s, there was a big strike by nurses because a white man who was working at Denver was found in the nurses' quarters.
I remember that. I was there at that time, as a matter of fact. I was there.
Right. I think it was called the GELOT. GELOT was the name of the white man.
I remember.
And so nurses have a long history of struggle in that place called Linden. One of these days, Doc, we're going to talk about the history of Linden.
Yes, yes.
Linden been striking
Is-
against, people say it's under the PPP. Linden been voting for the PNC and striking against the PNC.
Absolutely. I remember that my dad and my uncles and everybody, I remember that when we used to have these strikes. And
They used to call them Wildcat Strike. The first time I heard about Wildcat Strike is Linden.
That's right.
That is workers going on strike and then the union having to come and endorse the strike.
As so you all you got to do is march somebody toes and the gun. They used to make jokes.
And one of these days we got to go through the history of that place because they're trifling with Linden.
Yep.
And Linden is not a place to trifle with. They're trying to break that community. My brothers, thank you all very much. Lincoln had some difficulty there in number 28. And he couldn't come on tonight. I'll see you all next week, Friday. In the meantime, I have a wonderful rally tomorrow night. I was about to say a wonderful weekend, but it's going to be a working weekend because the rally is on tomorrow night. Thank you all very much.
Same to you, Elson.
And thank you all for staying with us as usual. This is struggle in action. If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. And we are in motion. We are in motion. We are in struggle. It is out of struggle that we would get progress. I want to thank those of you, all the people from Buxton Government Secondary who contacted me after our conversation last night. And Buxton Secondary is, of course, no longer there. We moved over to the Bladenhall Multilateral in 1975. So it's about 50 years ago. But that school, Buxton Secondary, really is part of the history of that community. And some of the old students still have a page on Facebook, and they celebrate the birthdays of people who went there. And so many of you who contacted me, and my mention of our teachers, Miss Seaford, Miss Fenella. Fenella is still there in the community. I think she lives in Melanie now, but she's in the community every day. Miss Seaford is somewhere in Africa. Miss Bryan is still alive. She's in her 90s now. She's still alive. Paul King is somewhere in Canada. And there are other teachers, Ovid John, I think he's in Connecticut. Henry Hines, I think he's still at UG, lecturing there in education. All the other teachers whose name I haven't mentioned, and the students of that school, Buxton Secondary. Thanks for those of you who contacted me, and to say thanks for remembering that school and remembering the experience we had there. That rally's tomorrow at 5 o'clock. If you're on the ground, turn out for the rally. If you're not on the ground, tune in. They're going to be streaming it. I know Cam's TV will stream it. I know the APNU AFC will stream it, and so forth. Please make sure that you are part of that experience tomorrow evening. So again, thank you all very much for staying with us. I know we went over tonight an hour and a half, but I'm sure you will agree with me that the time was worth it. Good company. See you all tomorrow night at the rally at Burnham Park. No, Burnham Court. Burnham Court. Burnham Court. Just opposite the little gardens, the small gardens, there, Promenade Gardens. See you all.
Yeah, my name is Jasmine Caldata Francis Wakenham, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
So, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.